Hello, I'm Garrick Ohlsson. I'm the piano soloist this week with the Nashville Symphony and Giancarlo Guerrero, and we are playing, they're playing Tchaikovsky and other pieces. I am playing the Barber Piano Concerto with the orchestra. Most of the pieces that most of the soloists play with the Nashville Symphony are very difficult, and not for kids to try without adult supervision at home, definitely. This piece is difficult for two reasons. It's a virtuoso piano concerto in the mold of Prokofiev and Rachmaninoff. And the disclaimer I'd like to make about it is that it's not more difficult than the Prokofiev or Rachmaninoff concertos, but those represent kind of a summit of virtuosity and difficulty of a certain pianistic kind, where you're, shall we say, fully employed with everything that a virtuoso pianist can possibly do. So the other difficulty of the piece is its still relative unfamiliarity. There was a time when they thought the 4-minute mile couldn't be broken, and then it was historic and a great human achievement. And now, after that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have done it. So, same way with the Rite of Spring of Stravinsky, and same way with the Barber Concerto. Nobody ever thought it was unplayable. Everybody just thought it was difficult and very tricky, which it is. But part of it is the idiom, which is very mid-20th century. It's full of changes of rhythm, irregular rhythms, and familiarity actually makes it less scary for the performer. Familiarity it's a bit like, once you've climbed the mountain, you can actually see the view from the top, whereas the first time through, you wonder if you can actually get there. So that's part of what's difficult about it. Well, let me just do a little bit of historical stuff. The piece was premiered in 1962 in New York at the then new Philharmonic Hall, at the brand new first week of the opening of Lincoln Center. And the 5 so-called Big 5 American orchestras were all invited to give a concert, and each one, as part of their contribution, were to play a premiere of an American work. And this was by far the sensational success of the week. It's easy to understand that because Barber's music, although it's mid-20th century, is not very progressive for its time. At that time, Carter and Sessions and Babbitt were more or less, and Copland, who was getting very atonal at that point, were the sort of kings of the roost. And Barber was considered too old-fashioned, too lyrical, too much like Rachmaninoff. Too populist of a bent. So he actually did write a rough, tough piano concerto, which sounds very mid-20th century, but it's still full of lyricism as he is, and accessibility. However, let me just give you a couple of examples from the first one. This is a very hard concerto to tell you about by giving you themes, because the themes don't give you any idea what the story is about. It's like saying that Gone with the Wind has a heroine in it. Okay, and her name is this. Well, that doesn't tell you what happens. But anyway, it starts in a very austere fashion at the beginning with the solo piano, not cadenza, but statement of thematic material. And so on. Each one of those scraps of material, of course, is worked out in the movement. There's also a lyrical second theme, which doesn't sound quite like Rachmaninoff, but it sounds much more smooth. And then the violas take it over. Then there's a long, quite romantic section in the orchestra, and so on, but I'm just telling you about it doesn't really do the trick. There's a lot of even 12-tone writing in the piece, not much and not strict. So Barber, even though he was considered to be old-fashioned, was certainly keeping up with all the trends in modern music. It comes to a tremendous noisy cadenza in the first movement, which climaxes, returns to the opening passionate material. But anyway, as I say, words about music don't really tell you. Perhaps the most important thing to know about the first movement is it's about 12 minutes long, because that's the most important thing to know about any piece you've never heard before. Because, it's just like if you fly from here to Knoxville, you set yourself differently than if you fly from here to Tokyo. I mean, it's a different kind of spectrum. The second movement's about 7 or 8 minutes long, and the finale is about 6. So I've let the cat out of the bag. Maybe I've estimated just a bit short, but the totality is about 26 minutes, just the perfect length for a romantic piano concerto with heavy piano and orchestra interaction. The second movement is taken from a flute piece, a canzonetta, a little song for flute that he wrote as a flute solo, and it's very beautiful, and it's a little bit quasi East Asian in a certain sense in its mood, not unlike Mahler's Song of the Earth, his great song symphony, which is based on Chinese poems. It's definitely a Western idea of Asian, and it's not even very Asian, but it just has little elements and lots of orchestral touches that Mahler had used, which I can't show you. But here's the basic tune. It's the most lyrical, Rachmaninoff-like section of the piece. And then the rest doesn't make any sense as a piano solo because the orchestral accompaniment is so rich and so much part of the texture. But it's very melodic and very veers between wintry and very warm, and it's very lyric, and it's everybody's favorite movement in the piece. Of course, immediately you have no trouble loving this right from the start. The last movement is the one that's considered the scariest because it's in the time signature of 5/8, 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, which doesn't have. It doesn't 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 is fine, but 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 is either 1 2 3 4 5 or 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1. And so it's kind of a groove you get into, and I'll just play you a little bit of what the piano does at the beginning and just show you what that theme sounds like. So it's very kind of American. That's the kind of music at that time in the world that would only come out of America. That wouldn't be German or Spanish or Finnish or something. Has a very American. It's not jazz, but it's the consciousness of an American kind of symphonic sounds. And I wanted to add also that the first movement has a lot of what we would call a film noir sound in it. It's in dark alleys and urban. And this is urban also. So the joke about 5/4 is that it would be much easier if you went. But then it would lose all of its punch. It has a couple of much lighter episodes. Everything stays in 5, and then describing, as I say, what happens is very difficult. But it winds up with an enormous smashing climax, which always tends to bring the audience to its feet if we do our job right. And it's very hard to describe this piece. The last movement is the most nervous, or not nervous making. It's nervy. It's very aggressive and very noisy and very 20th century, and it's a marvelous, magnificent work. As I said, I think it fulfills an American mid-century idea of a Prokofiev Rachmaninoff piano concerto where the piano does a maximum and the orchestra does a great deal, and everybody usually goes home pretty happy.